All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Oh, my gosh, how exciting it is. A new week, a new set of potential executive orders, and some news here in California, where we come to you every day, Monday through Friday, live, 11 to 1 on the West Coast, 2 to 4 on my darling East Coast. How about it for the East Coasters? And all of America in between. I have, as you might expect, at full strength today, Kim is in the house, as the kids used to say.
Kim, how are you?
And Tony as well, riding herd over the immense technical feat that is putting this show on every day. Today is a special day. Gary Dietrich joins us bottom of the hour. I know he is a political pundit, and we will be throwing heat today at Gary, talking about the situation in America right now and the very real choices that the president has as the courts have pushed back on a lot of his agenda. But there's much of his agenda that goes on unchallenged. Jared Yates Sexton joins us in the second hour. He is one of my favorites, and you'll love him also because I think he does something that we do softly on this show, and that is we raise the alarm. But I think we do it with a kind of softer messaging. Jared really lays it out there. And the great thing about Jared Yates Sexton, and again, he joins us in hour 2, is that he was early to the party on pointing out all of the ways in which there was going to be an ascendance to power of an authoritarian leader in America. In other words, all of the different elements in America that make America, or made America and continue to make America, ripe for the rise of authoritarianism. And Kim and I were talking off there, and she was noticing that, back in 2016, Jared Yates Sexton was ringing the bell. And I think the bell was being rung by many people, but back in 2016, it was, Trump, the first season of Trump, before we saw him completely empowered by the Supreme Court, and his reemergence now in season 2, where he is a full-blown, it would seem, unfettered authoritarian. In addition to his authoritarian instincts, of course, he has all of the instincts associated with corruption, and now the corruption is on full display. We'll touch on that a little bit later as well. So
I only wish this were a show. If this were a show, I would think, the writers are really going crazy over there.
Yeah, it is. It has a reality show feel to it. Welcome
really
to
jumping the shark.
And he comes from television. I mean, he comes from performance. Donald Trump's favorite thing to do is to be out there in front of the cameras, to pontificate, to peacock, to in the moment make proclamations. That's why he really loves these huge press conferences where he'll make everything from Liberation Day announcements about tariffs to statements that get tremendous amounts of buzz, like the Alcatraz announcement, which we'll get to in a moment. But before we do, got some business to do. I noticed already people have risen to our rescue. Tony, you weren't here in the when it all started, but we are facing a fiscal crisis on this show, and we really need the help of our audience, and our audience has really stepped up. It is our spring money drive. It's our spring Ka Ching. Yes, thank you very much for the spring Ka Ching title, which was offered by Tom. And thank you for the graphic, which was created by Courtney. But in any case, I mentioned spring Ka Ching because I've always said from the very beginning that the essence of what keeps us on is the contributions of our audience. And they've been here. Most of the audience that started the show and continue to really robustly support the show They were here at the beginning because they came with us through KGO Radio, which was a huge radio station in San Francisco that went away. And when the station went away, we came here. That is really the origin story of this show. And so many of the listeners from the KGO days came here to YouTube and across the podcast universe. We're on all the major podcast platforms as well as an audio podcast. And the only reason that we exist is because of those people who came here and support the show monthly with donations. So what we've done is, and I'll only spend another 45 seconds or so on this, is we've augmented those donations typically since the very beginning with YouTube revenue. And as the show has grown, the revenue from YouTube has grown. Well, the bottom has fallen out of our YouTube revenue, just to state it bluntly. And the reason for that is several-fold, and I've looked at a lot of different other creators' impressions on this. It's happened across the board. A lot of us who are pushing back on the existing administration, we're being played down in the algorithm right now. And as a result, we're not getting ad revenue that we did. The other reason is that advertisers see some of this dialogue that we're having as a bit radioactive. And so the only way to support this kind of dialogue in independent media is with your support. And so thank you for the super stickers and the super chats that you provide. That really does help buoy us. And of course, Patreon and PayPal, we have links to both under this video and under all our videos. And that's the way to really, on an ongoing basis, support us. So that's the word on that. It is Spring Ka Ching. And again, I think already in to the madness today is my favorite McAllister, Lucy McAllister. Always there. Thank you.
Big shout out.
Big shout out. Also, Asley Petrus, come on with my favorite name. Love that name, and a big shout out to
Big
Asley.
shout out.
Thank you, all of you who have stepped up with super stickers and super chats and in Patreon and PayPal to help create a little momentum and get us out of this fiscal pinch. We like to pay everybody on this show a good wage, and we're running just into the red, which is really an odd thing to say, but it's where we sit. So we really appreciate all of your contributions and help and support. So, all right, let's get started.
The Mark Thompson Show.
There is, I think, there are a couple of aspects to what we're seeing across the board from the White House I'm talking about. There's the distraction, and then there are the essential crises that demand our attention. This doesn't mean that everything that's a distraction is irrelevant. It just means that it feels a little distraction-oriented when you start saying things like we should open Alcatraz again as a prison. The problem is, and this is what he said, Donald Trump has said, you can go ahead and put it up there, Tony, thank you, rebuild and open Alcatraz. This was his post over the weekend. For too long, America has been plagued by vicious, violent, and repeat criminal offenders. The dregs of society, he says, who will never contribute anything other than misery and suffering. He capitalizes the M in misery and the S in suffering. When we were a more serious nation, in times past, in fact, there's a random capitalization of words across the way here. In times past, we did not hesitate to lock up the most dangerous criminals and keep them far away from anyone they could harm. Anyway, he then gets on to, that is why today I'm directing the Bureau of Prisons, together with the Department of Justice, FBI, and Homeland Security, to reopen a substantially enlarged and rebuilt Alcatraz to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. Then he goes on to say, we'll no longer be held hostage, etc. We will make America great again. Now, this I put in the distraction category, but because of the way this White House and this administration is configured, he is surrounded by yes men and women who are, yes, sir, going to get right on that, sir. And that's exactly what's happening. Now, the reopening of Alcatraz is absurd. It was closed because it is way too expensive to operate.
I thought we were cutting money. No, we're going to outspend ourselves on this?
Apparently, this is where he wants to be. And it was closed because it was both expensive. It was closed back in 1962, the order was. And there were three big factors, much more expensive to operate than facilities elsewhere in the country. And just while we're on that, when he talks about all of these criminals and we need a place to house them, dude, we have plenty of places to house criminals. We have max prisons across the West, across the East. You can spin the wheel and you can put any of those offenders that you're talking about in one of those prisons. There's no prison shortage per se. It was much more expensive to operate than other facilities was the first reason. And then it came to light that there was a real escape potential from Alcatraz that didn't exist at a lot of the other prisons. So, A, you're saving money by closing this thing. B, you're decreasing the chance of losing these prisoners that you care so much about housing and making sure that they never get out. And there are just too many people for Alcatraz to operate effectively. Alcatraz has a max capacity of 336 prisoners. 336. So you want to pour all of federal dollars into reopening Alcatraz when it can only house a few hundred? Okay, you're going to make it you're going to MAGA-ize it, so it's going to be bigger. Great. So what is that? Let's double it. 600? It's just not viable. So, I mean, today's prisons hold thousands of people. Now, we can talk about the prison system, we can talk about the privatization of the prison system, et cetera, but the idea of reopening Alcatraz is absurd. We all know it's absurd. Even those who he has charged with investigating reopening Alcatraz, they all know it's absurd. But again, they have to say, yes, sir, yes, sir. And they'll take what has now become a tourist attraction, right? It's run by the National Park Service, and they're going to try to, I don't know, reconstitute it as a place for violent offenders.
It's
Makes
ridiculous.
no sense.
I think the plan is to build a new massive prison out on Alcatraz.
I see.
Right. And so here's the thing about Alcatraz. I think he's thinking, what's the worst prison? What's the most notorious prison in America where we can really be mean to these criminals and these, we could be our meanest, who could treat them in the worst way. It's another avenue for him to be cruel and be tough and look like, you want to mess with me, I'm going to send you to the Rock. I'm going to send you to the big house. Like, we're going to reopen the worst place in the world. Come on. What did you want your own? What is the name of the prison in El Salvador? Sesco or something?
Yes,
you want your own one of those? That's what he's trying to do. It's a tourist hotspot now. Come on now.
It is. Kim's right. I mean, and she's right to use the word hotspot. I mean, it's like one of those things that you want to do if you're touring the San Francisco Bay Area. And thank you for the super chat. Last Angry Manny for $5.25 says, escape from Trump's obsession of Alcatraz. 525 on 525. Yeah, thank you very much for that, and appreciate the super chat. Yeah, Manny. I do think that Trump's vision of the world is informed so much by movies and television. He doesn't read, so his notions about things, I think, as Kim has suggested, sort of fall to the mythology that's created through the world of film and the world of television. And so in that mythology, Alcatraz was the big bad prison, right? It's the focus of so many stories. So maybe you're right about that, Kim. That's sort of the reason for his obsession. But
I took a tour out there once, and this is back when classroom, because I'm from the Bay Area, so you go there with your school, and our class took the tour, and back then, I don't know if they do this anymore. I don't think they do. They put you in solitary confinement, and they tell you the story about how they would put these men in there naked, strip them naked, and it was freezing. And it's this dark, like cavernous, not that big, but it's just, you walk in and it's this dark, the walls are dark concrete and the place is cold, and they would spray you with water, Shh, and then they'd shut the door and they would slam the door. And there I am, this kid standing in solitary confinement in Alcatraz, freaking the F out, thinking, oh my God, this is the worst. You could feel the cold in your bones. Imagine the people that were sprayed with water naked and standing in there. I'll never forget it. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's what he's looking for. Like that's the when he says that reopen Alcatraz, I'm thinking, what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's, I think, the shiny object that we jump on as media, because it is a shiny object, and it is kind of the latest utterance from the Mad King. But there you see the lineup of what the prison cells look like now in Alcatraz. There was a great scene in
So I married an axe murderer.
So I Married an Axe Murderer, thank you,
Yeah.
with Phil Hartman. There you go. Yeah, and Phil is the tour guide, and he is just hilarious. And I'd run it for you, but I'll be demonetized if I do. So otherwise, I would, and you should find it and watch it after this show, because it's not long and it's wonderful. It's Mike Myers and Phil Hartman, and that film has great moments, but that really, that one little selection from the Alcatraz tour has a lot of really funny moments. So the Escape from Alcatraz was the Saturday night movie, says Katie Lynch, on PBS. Could that have set Trump's mind? If there is a set on Trump's mind. No, I don't. Well, I don't know if he watches much PBS, or maybe. But yeah, that's the latest on that. And again, as I say, it's a shiny object that the media jumps on. So in that sense, it's a clear distraction. It will never happen. But on the other hand, it is grabbing a lot of people around Trump who want to scurry to do whatever the Mad King wants. And so, as I say, his every utterance, instead of being dismissed or parked on the back burner, they go, yes, sir, but we'll look into it right away, sir. That takes money, it takes time, and it's also, it just speaks to the general chaos of this administration. But
The Mark Thompson Show.
yeah, watching PBS, he wants it gone, says Adam Cohen. Maud Day, are you kidding me? Thank you, Maud Day. Spring Ka Ching has sprung with Maud Day, a $50 super
Big shout out.
chat sticker. I guess it would be a sticker, chat, technically.
Yeah.
With the hugs and kisses from Maud Day. Thank you, Maud Day, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Really, really cool of you. This is our Spring Ka Ching fund drive. Ron Cook, thank you for jumping in with the 20. Appreciate that too. Big shout out. Ron and Maud and all of you. Tom, can't let Kelly show me up. Kelly Malloy, Tom Malloy now says with a $5 super chat. Thank you. Cranky Charcoal with $4.99. Those are British pounds, are they?
Yeah.
Yeah, how lovely.
They call that sterling?
Yes, British sterling, exactly. Yeah, quid. Almost £5. What is that?
Make Papa Mache great again?
Make Papa Mache like paper mache. Right. That's the way they got out of prison the first time there. Thank you from across the pond. Thank you. Pamela Kirby, back in California, been to several Eastern European countries, only missed a few shows, and happy to be with Mark Thompson Show live. Pamela Kirby, we're happy you're back, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming home to try to right the ship of state. Last Angry Manny, 555, said, would federal workers be the prison guards and warden? And then fired? Oh, yeah, that's right. Forgot. That's the plan. We hire you, then we fire you. That's the new plan. Thank you, Manny. And Trevor Starr in Hollywood with breaking fake news that Trump is announcing he will recommission the Queen Mary to invade Greenland. Yes, well, it's a good plan. The president did sit down. Inlays says that Trump suing Chief Justice of SCOTUS, claiming Chief Justice shouldn't control the judicial conference, arguing president should. Discuss with the next guest. Is that right? He's suing. Is that right? Do you have that, Kim?
I'll find it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Inlays.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to get to the Welker interview. We'll run some of that with Gary Dietrich too, perhaps, because I think we're going to bump up against him. But the sit down with Kristen Welker was a bit tortured. I thought he's very hard to interview, to be fair. He's kind of got his own deal, that is to say his own agenda, and he's going to get to it one way or the other. He also has, sort of playing the hits. Biden was an idiot. Biden was barely there. Biden left me nothing. I'm doing great. So let's run a little bit from this sit down with Welker, and we'll talk about this first one. I believe it's on trade. Is it Tony, or I forget? Let's give a look, and we have a few cuts for you.
You say that, doesn't that just sound good? After
It's
being
about the border.
abused
This
for
is about the
years
border.
by an incompetent president that allowed people to pour through an open border, criminals from all over the world, murderers and insane people from mental institutions and insane asylums. Isn't it a beautiful thing when you say it's the most secure it's ever been in the history of our country? Isn't that a nice statement?
Well, I'm curious to know what it means. You declared a national emergency on the southern border. The order is still in place.
By the way,
even
it
though
means
you're saying
exactly
the
what
border's
you
secure.
said. It means we have the most secure border we've ever had.
Well, and I guess the question
complicated.
becomes, when will you know that the emergency is over? Are you planning to lift it at some point? Is it necessary? Because obviously the military is involved. Will you lift that emergency?
Well, the biggest emergency is the courts aren't allowing us to take really.
We're going to
bad
talk
people
about
out.
that, but talk to me first
that's
about
to me
this.
the emergency.
Talk to
because
me first about this.
The border
emergency.
now is not the emergency. The border is all part of the same thing, though. The big emergency right now is that we have thousands of people that we want to take out, and we have some judges that want everybody to go to
Some
court.
of them you appointed, sir,
That's
including
all right.
3
I
on the
mean,
Supreme Court.
They change. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how that happens, but they do change.
Just to button this up, though, are you planning to lift that emergency order anytime soon? Now that the border's secure?
We have an
You say the
emergency. We have a
border's secure.
massive emergency overall. It's an overall emergency on immigration. And if the courts don't allow us to take people out, if we had to have a court case, think of it, every single person, we have millions of people. We're going to have millions of court cases. Figure 2 weeks a court case. It would be 300 years.
So
All
let's
right,
talk
stop
about
right there for a
this,
second.
because-
Yes, well, we'll come back to this. We'll pick up right there where we left off. But that is the way we work. I mean, I know he's framing it so that we have millions of court cases. We don't have millions of people waiting for the court case on deportation. I mean, let's look at the recent history. You had close to 300, probably 70 of whom were not members of MS-13. If any of them were, I don't know. But there's no way to know because the court case never proceeded. That's not millions of people. That's 300 cases. And as I've mentioned to you before, the immigration court proceeds very quickly. It's like traffic court. So it's not some long proceeding. Now, admittedly, there should be more in the way of immigration judges, and there should be more of these proceedings and an apparatus set up so there can be more of this.
Well, he fired several immigration judges as part of the cutting. So if you need more judges, then why are you letting them go?
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of chaos by design where they deliberately got rid of this first group. As I say, was it 272, which was close to 300? And there are others waiting to go. But now they are, I'm going to say they're guarded in the way they're proceeding, not defying the Supreme Court per se, but also not obeying the Supreme Court order. I have said on this show, and I could be proven wrong ultimately, but I've said that Garcia, who is really the source of so much controversy, the man who was admittedly by mistake deported and now is in El Salvador, first in that max prison, now he's in another prison. He's not coming home. He's not coming home because this president has made it a point to not want him back and has created this mythology around him that he is MS-13. Now, I'm not saying he is MS-13 or not. I'm sure he may or may not be a good guy. This has nothing to do with him. It has to do with the fact that you've got to put him before a judge and go through the process of deportation. It's not long, as I say, but it has to be done. Otherwise, you could pluck Kim McAllister off the street, say that she's not in the country legally, put her on a plane to El Salvador, and she has no way of showing a passport, proving anything, talking to a lawyer. It's outrageous. It really is un-American. So that's what this is about. So when he talks about millions and millions of cases, come on. It's not millions and millions of cases. It's a process that must start. Go back to it, Tony. Thank you.
This, because obviously you've had a back and forth with the Supreme Court. In a 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court directed your administration to facilitate the return. You've talked about this in the past of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from a prison in El Salvador, whose deportation your administration called an administrative error. You said in a recent interview you could bring him back, but you won't. Are you defying the Supreme Court, sir?
No, I'm relying on the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, who's very capable, doing a great job, because I'm not involved in the legality or the illegality. I have lawyers to do that, and that's why I have a great DOJ. We have a great one. We had a very corrupt one before. Now we have a great one. And they're not viewing the decision the way you said it. They don't view it that way at all. They think it's a totally different decision.
Well, you say you have the power to bring him back, though. Your attorney general says, quote, that's up to El Salvador. Just to put a fine point on this, do you have the power to bring Abrego Garcia back as the Supreme Court?
Well, I have the power to ask for him to come back if I'm instructed by the Attorney General that it's legal to do so. But the decision as to whether or not he should come back will be the head of El Salvador. He's a very capable man.
Well, you know, and your attorney general has said the issue is with that word facilitate. Will you seek clarification from the Supreme Court? Do you need to go back to the Supreme Court?
We may do that. I was asking about that. We may do that. There are some people that say, bring him back, put him in trial, and you get him out right away, because you see what happened just this morning. Tapes came out, horrible tapes from his wife. You don't get much worse than that. You don't get, I mean, he seems certainly like a very dangerous, very bad person, but even the wife, who was so afraid, she was afraid to talk, and all of a sudden tapes got released this morning that were devastating to him.
Yeah,
And this
okay,
is the
you can
point,
stop there. He's now making it about the guy, and that's smart probably on his behalf to do that. But it's and he's right about the tapes, because they go back to frantic phone conversations that the wife had because she was being slapped around by this guy, and it's pretty horrible. Now she's out in front of the media saying, please, he is someone I'm desperately in love with, and you know, his kids need him and all this kind of thing. So, but the more you talk about the guy, the more you lose the plot. The plot is everybody needs to be in front of a judge before you can do this. And that's the whole game here. The minute you start plucking people off the street without any due process, you're living in a fascist dictatorship. And I'll tell you, I think we are, and I want to talk to Jared Yates Sexton about this. I think the coup is complete. And I think we're flirting with the total loss of American freedoms and democracy, the democracy that provides a people's voice that's heard by the government. I feel as though that's really close to being completely lost.
When you have a president who says, when asked, you need to follow the Constitution, when he stood up at the inauguration, and while he didn't put his hand on a Bible, did swear to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, asked directly, do you need to follow the Constitution of the United States? And he says, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Right. He the way he plays it is, I don't know whether this is unconstitutional or not. He's suggesting, I don't know whether this is unconstitutional or not. I leave that to my lawyers. I know that I was elected to get rid of these people, and I'm getting rid of them. So, and the other thing I would say, and it's an adjacent point, but it's really an important one, I think, is that you're not getting rid of violent offenders and all of these violent criminals across America. You're plucking scientific researchers out of street scenes in Boston. You're detaining someone who is a scientific researcher, a renowned scientific researcher. You're detaining her and sending her to a Louisiana prison because she brought frog embryos in that the head researcher asked her to bring. And those frog embryos weren't declared, and because of that, she's imprisoned. I mean, it's outrageous. So Hearings, not trials, says Zana Griffith. All right. Yeah, I mean, immigration hearings, fine. If the point is, you need to be before a judge. All right. That was Trump's stem winder with Kristen Welker. He was also asked about Greenland. And again, I would put Greenland in the same category as Alcatraz. And the category is distraction. Now, let me just say this, and then we'll play the cut with Greenland. Trump is right about Greenland having valuable assets that can be mined by the U.S. and exploited by the West in many ways. And it is a strategic area in both the mineral resources it has and also militarily. So he's right about that. I don't think there's a revelation there. But when he starts smack talking Greenland and talking about taking it over and, you know, I could take over Greenland in a heartbeat if I wanted to. I mean, this is the kind of thing he says. That, I think, is, again, another distraction. The American military is not going into Greenland. It's just not going to happen. But here is Trump on Greenland.
You and I,
They need us. We don't need them.
you and I talked, and I asked you if you would rule out military force to take Greenland, and you said no, you don't rule out anything. Would you rule out military force to take Canada?
Well, I think we're not going to ever get to that point. It could happen. Something could happen with Greenland. I'll be honest. We need that for national and international security.
But not
I
with
think it's
Canada?
highly unlikely. I don't see it with Canada. I just don't see it. I have to be honest with you.
Okay, but you don't rule it out for Greenland.
And by the way, Canada, they spend less money on military than practically any nation in the world. They pay NATO less than any nation. They think we're subsidized. They think we are going to protect them. And really, we are. But the truth is, they don't carry their full share, and it's unfair to the United States and our taxpayers.
But you are not ruling out military force to take Greenland.
I don't rule it out. I don't say I'm going to do it, but I don't rule out anything. No, not there. We need that. We need Greenland very badly. Greenland is a very small amount of people, which we'll take care of and we'll cherish them and all of that. But we need that for international security. Do you know we have Russian boats and we have Chinese boats, gunships all over the place, aircraft carriers, gunships, going up and down the coast of Greenland. We need that to be protected. Internationally, we need it.
So you are willing to send U.S. troops to claim a sovereign territory?
I didn't say that. You asked me a question. Would you? Is there a circumstance? It could happen. I doubt it will, but it certainly could happen with respect to Greenland.
Okay, let me ask you about Iran.
Okay, let's. I really just wanted the Greenland stuff. So you see, I think what you have there, and I don't blame her for asking the question, but again, I think you just have a shiny object, distraction-oriented kind of subject in American military force being used to take over Greenland. I mean, I just, again, don't think it's going to happen. Again, less than 1% chance. Just like there's a less than 1% chance that Alcatraz is going to be reopened and, you know, reimagined as this max prison. It's again thrown into the media zeitgeist, and then we in the media pick up on it. And I don't blame us for picking up on it. It's kind of an incendiary notion. I mean, you've got the leader of the free world who is talking about invading another country. Yeah, I think you have to give that some oxygen. But just as a practical matter, it falls into the category of distraction, I think. CC Ryder says, BS, Trump wants to monetize Greenland for himself and the oligarchs. Money is always the root. I mean, let me be clear, and I'll talk to Gary Dietrich about this too. There are deals to be made, and I'm sure there will be a deal made on Greenland in some way. I'm not talking about ownership. I'm talking about participation in the same way maybe that Zelensky has had to find a way to establish linkage with the U.S. on so many things related to the Ukraine war with Russia. But so in that way, yeah, I think that money can be siphoned off and money will go to the oligarchs in all of that. Just we can talk about that. I mean, this has been an extraordinary thing to watch money pour into the Trump coffers. Again, I can chat with Gary about this. But more to the point, I just don't think you're going to see any sort of American military involvement in taking over Greenland in a hostile way. Mark, do you really believe there's going to be another election, Jose? This is a great question. The answer is, of course, there'll be another election. The question is, there's an election in Russia. There's an election in China. There's an election everywhere. Having elections, having judges, having all of these things that we have that kind of remind us, oh, yeah, we live in a free country. Those things are all out there. The question is the legitimacy of elections. So we'll talk about that in the days to come. I don't want to leave Gary waiting anymore. Happy Cinco de Mayo from Uncle Scrooge. Yeah, Feliz Cinco de Mayo, everybody. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Pretty cool. And I also want to recognize that we are in the middle of a spring fund drive. We'll get back to it in a moment because many of you have really been so good about supporting this show through our spring Ka Ching, which is going on now. We can't lose this show, says Enid Fox. Thank you, Enid. Happy to help. Dwight and Enid. Dwight and Enid, thank you. Thank you very much. In fact, I might say, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Very kind of you. All of you who have stepped up, thank you. We really need you now more than ever and very much appreciate your help and your support. All right, how about some
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy is a great political pundit. You can find him across iHeart Radio, also on the CBS television stations. He's our former colleague from KGO Radio in San Francisco, Gary Dietrich. Hi, Gary.
Hello, Mark. Glad to have you back, and happy Cinco, my brother.
Yeah, you too, my friend. Igualmente, as they say. Yeah, right back at you. So, look, I'll get to some California stuff here in a second, but boy, Trump serves up the shiny objects, as I was saying in the first half hour, and we in the media scoop them up. I don't think we can ignore them, but by the same token, I don't know how serious they are. You would agree with me on Alcatraz and Greenland. I mean, I don't see the American military. These are subjects that have come up over the weekend. The American military involvement in Greenland, I'd say, is the longest of shots. I don't see it as, and Alcatraz, I put in the same category. Nothing's happening with Alcatraz. Am I right?
Well, I'm trying to connect the dots here, Mark, and I'm saying to myself, okay, are there any rare earth minerals underneath Alcatraz that we ought to know about? You know, maybe there's something we've been missing, those of us who've been in San Francisco longer. And secondly, I really want to see the military blockade of Alcatraz. I want to see that thing ringed with aircraft carriers, people coming out. I want people parachuting onto Alcatraz, like that old Sean Connery movie, Escape from Alcatraz, whatever.
Right.
I mean, right. Yeah, I don't know. Listen, I just wonder. There are times, Mark, especially on the weekends. I just think Trump's got too much time on his hands. What is he doing sitting around Mar-a-Lago or even in the, sitting in the Oval Office twiddling his something? Dang it, I've been thinking about Alcatraz. I think how does this stuff come into his mind? That's the part of it that I want to know. I just think, well, pretty soon next, it's this wheat field in Kansas that's been really caught my attention a long time ago. We're going after it. I don't know. To cut to the chase here, Mark, there's not going to be any military action on Greenland. That's not going to happen, just like there's not going to be on Canada. Now, you in your intro, I think you made a really good point, Mark. Could there be a deal where rare earth minerals, which are on Greenland as well, become part of a U.S. deal to provide enhanced guaranteed security? Yes. There's no question that the geopolitical makeup right now is causing literally, Mark, every corner of the world to be looked at by the superpowers. There's no getting around it, okay? The Arctic, as we know, has become that over the last decade. Greenland is basically the entry point to the Arctic between the West, between the United States and Russia. So, but if my take on it is this: if we were to cut some deal with Greenland, my guess is it would look something like maybe the Ukraine situation, where we provide guarantees of security in response to that. And by the way, it could end up looking like something with the oil rights in Alaska, whereas Alaskans get a check from their own state government as part of the deal that was cut to allow Alaskan oil drilling. Could that happen for Greenlanders? And might that really sweeten the deal? I think that's something that could clearly be looked at.
Well, as an aside, I wish that same deal existed for all Americans, the way that we have our natural resources exploited by these companies, and then we have to buy back our own oil. F that, man. You should, if you want to drill here in this country, I mean, if you want real, this is like a MAGA, this is real MAGA. You want to drill in this country, you are going to pay this country for those privileges and not at these discounted oil leasing rates. You're going to pay real money to Americans who let you drive those drills into the American landscape on increasingly bigger amounts of acreage. Anyway, so but that's a digression.
Well, Mark, can I just say that
Yes,
as
sir.
a guy who lived in the beautiful environs of Santa Barbara for my undergrad, those beaches, as you probably know, have tar on them at different times of the year. And there's been debate for decades about how much that offshore oil drilling there in the Santa Barbara Channel contributes to that. So I will tell you, there'll be many undergrads at UCSB that would say yes and amen. I need my check for walking on the beaches and getting tar. That's what I need.
Damn straight. And you then have seen, as a Californian, the way there have been spills. I mean, there have been huge spills, pipeline spills, both offshore and onshore in that Santa Barbara area. But we digress. And again, the cleanup has always been short of where it should be. All right. The other thing that Trump is doing is clearly, when it comes to these deportations, he's holding the line. It doesn't appear that he is inclined to, A, bring anybody back from anywhere once they've been deported, and B, modify in any way the general pattern by which he is deporting those that he views shouldn't be in this country. Can you speak to the the last thing I'll say, Gary, and I think you'd agree with me on this, this is really a net win politically for him still. People don't see this as an issue. It's like, yeah, get these people out. I don't know. It's a court case thing, whatever. He's doing what we want him to do, which is to get these people out.
Yeah, let me take the second one first, Mark, on the political side of this, okay? I mean, if you look at the polling since Trump, before he was elected, we know that the immigration was one of the top issues that got him into the White House again. And secondly, since he's been elected, and again, Mark, we've talked about this. This isn't just on the Republican side. You look at Democrats and independents polled on this. They are supportive. Now, not of all the specifics. Let's not, say that everybody wants to check every Trump box on immigration. But the general concept of, quote unquote, closing the border, getting a handle on immigration, that has been wildly popular, and it continues to be popular. So I think you're right. He's got a lot of political cover for those actions. The challenge becomes, Mark, that every week there's a new set of parameters, right? And a new set of information. How much is Social Security information, Social Security system going to share? Supposedly they found over 6,000 undocumented folks who, through the Social Security. I mean, that's the challenge. And that's where the courts and especially the public and the media have a challenge keeping up on all the specifics of it. Now, to your first point about deportations and reversing those, sort of sending the train backwards, you're right. It looks like that's not going to happen. I do not see any giant flights being organized to bring deportees back into the United States. In fact, of course, it would completely counterweight what we just talked about. People will be going, what are you talking about? Imagine all the folks who've been deported getting off the plane on the tarmac someplace in the U.S. I just think politically speaking and practically speaking, that ship has probably already sailed.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that just the one guy, he's not coming back. He's a cause celeb. I mean, he would be
right.
The admission of a mistake, which is something that Donald Trump never does. And there would be all that media, that gaggle of media with the guy landing, and it would be an absolute, there's no way he's coming back. And sadly, I think, I don't know what's going to happen to him down there, but if they have to, they may off him down there just to prevent. We'd like to send him back, but sadly, he committed suicide while in whatever the story is going to be.
Hey, Mark, one quick thing on that. Real quick thing on that. I think there's a number of Democrats who are very quietly, that is elected Democrats, hoping he doesn't come back because they don't want him to be the poster child of the midterm elections. All right, because they know it's a losing issue for them.
Right, and that's exactly the point. I love that you mentioned that. It's It's a political hot potato. I think there was a memo circulated, or certainly a message circulated among some high-profile Democrats, as you know, Gary, saying, don't go down to El Salvador anymore. This is not a winner for us politically. And so it is. Talk to me about the economy and about the tariffs. There's another shiny object that we didn't get to yet in the beginning of the show. I want to get to. I consider Alcatraz a shiny object, meaning it gets a lot of media attention, but it's never going to happen. And the Hollywood thing, where he's saying, I want a 100% tariff on foreign films, it's very vague whether he means foreign films like with subtitles made overseas and they come here, or if he says produced overseas. But again, so many parts of so many movies, as you're aware, like the Marvel Universe and the Star Wars films, they shoot in London, they post it in London. The movie making process is like the auto making process. All of these components come from all over the world, and then they put the movie together in this country, or they do the editing in London, et cetera. Speak to me if this is a distraction, or is this guy serious about this, do you think?
No, I think it's part of it. I don't think it's a distraction. I think it's part of Trump's larger bring everything back to the U.S., right? Why are you spending? And you know, Mark, you're down in the Hollywood area. You know this has actually been a local issue down in Southern California. How much production has moved out of Hollywood and SoCal and into not only internationally, but other states around the country, right? That's been a real big concern, as you know, for the industry and for people that work in it. Now, as far as other countries, there's been an awful lot of filming, as you know, that's gone up to Canada, that's gone to places like Eastern Europe, because it's just cheaper to do. I mean, that's been the bottom line. Those countries have incentives. The labor rates are different. I'm not sure, but you probably know, Mark, better than me about SAG-AFTRA and all the union stuff. I mean, I don't know what happens with all those expenses for filmmaking, but I don't know how you're going to film a Mission Impossible based in Rome in Kansas City. I don't know how you're going to do that. You know, so we'll see when Tom Cruise comes out here at the end of the month with, I guess, the 123rd installment. Maybe it's the last one. I don't know. But that's right. I do think it's part of Trump's larger narrative. We got to let's not spend money overseas. Let's spend it at home.
Yeah, it's very true what Gary is saying, which is that a lot of the television and film projects that really defined Hollywood for so many years, for decades, they've left Hollywood now for all the reasons that you're saying, Gary. You know, it's just cheaper to do everything somewhere else. That somewhere else was and still is Atlanta, Vancouver, places like this were real favorites. And now overseas in, you know, Belarus or wherever, the places can be quite exotic for the reasons you said. But you'll have to see the clarity of the detail on this, because bringing it all back is something that Hollywood would like. In fact, you know this, Gary. Gavin Newsom in California, he's tried to make deals to incentivize production to get back to Hollywood, right? So absolutely,
110%. I mean, tax incentives. Some people, you know, this becomes a really fine line. There's some Democrats, even in California, say, wait a minute, you know, what are we giving quote unquote sweetheart deals to Hollywood for? They make billions of dollars, right? It's the same argument they make about other corporate interests. I mean, let's be honest about it. There's not a lot of mom and pop movie houses anymore, right? They're the big boys down there, right? You know who they are, Mark. And so this becomes dicey. But yeah, there's been a lot of states and governors, most notably ours, because this has been the heart of the movie industry for decades, who want it to come back. How much that's possible, given the cost structure, I just don't know. But certainly, Trump is. You know, you don't hear him concerned about bringing it back to California. You hear about him being concerned about bringing it back to the U.S. of A.
Yeah, right. He's not a big fan of California because of the politics. I want to talk to you about corruption. You know, the huge deal that was just announced by Abu Dhabi, that they were buying the coin, the Trump coin. Essentially, it's like this: Trump and the Trump family, they own a platform like a Coinbase type platform where you can buy and sell crypto. Okay. And that crypto platform is now being used by the UAE, in this case, to buy $2 billion worth of the Trump coin, okay? And in buying that, again, the transaction that takes place on that Trump-owned platform, they get a huge piece of, the way you would get a piece of any stock purchase that you might make. So they parked a bunch of money there, but it's not a little bunch. It's $2 billion, Gary, and the Trump family gets a direct payout from that. In addition to that, we've seen during the trade negotiations with Vietnam that they've not only dropped tariffs in Vietnam that were imposed on various American goods, but they've also greenlit a bunch of Trump projects for resorts. It's about $1.5 billion. So you begin to see the Trump family, right up front, benefiting from a bunch of negotiations that involve everything from tariffs to we don't know what in the case of UAE. I mean, it just is sort of goodwill. Can you speak to, I would call it open corruption? There is a pay-to-play quality to this administration that is of deep concern to me.
Well, it was one thing when you have gold tennis shoes, okay? You can only make so much on, it's only so big a market for gold tennis shoes, okay? People made a big deal about that. I'm like, how many tennis shoes are you going to sell, okay? I mean, the kids aren't going to buy them, so who's going to buy them? But you're right, Mark, when it comes to major currency transactions or major real estate deals, that brings it above the fence line, right? And to me, this is becoming part of the larger oligarchy narrative. And by the way, I think you and I talked about this after the AOC Bernie rally up here in Northern California, right? When Bernie got up at the podium and said, look, this is not just a Republican Party problem, this oligarchy thing. It's a Democratic Party problem as well. I mean, he was very upfront about that. So to me, Mark, it's weird how this thing is kind of bled together, right? The narrative during the Biden administration was very similar, that Biden himself and his family members, remember, his brother, his son, and whatever, were making money transactionally off of, Joe Biden, the vice president, and then Joe Biden, the president. And now we're seeing the same accusations, different transactions, but similar types of accusations about influence peddling, let's just call it that, with the Trumps. And to me, the larger narrative and the larger concern is what Bernie's talking about. You just have to maintain a sense of internal domestic integrity in your political process and international reputation if you want to be taken credibly and seriously, if you want people to believe that the system is going to work. That's my larger concern, Mark.
Yeah, and this is true. It falls into the category of influence peddling. And it is also true that people for years in Washington have traded on their access to the highest offices in the land. So that Biden's name was used by other Biden family members doesn't surprise me. I don't like it, and I think it should be illegal, but it's not illegal. Similarly here, and you can remind everyone of this. By the way, I'll first say this makes Hunter Biden and all the Biden family, whatever transactions they had, look like a Mr. Rogers neighborhood. I mean, it looks like a kid's birthday party compared to what they're doing now. This is billions of dollars flowing into the coffers. I just mentioned two deals. They're worth north of $3 billion, just those two, to the Trump family personally. So, again, I would say this is in another category, but it's of corruption, I would say. But it's in the same basket of corruption that you're talking about. And so the thing I would remind everybody of is, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the president, though, there's no illegality here because he's not bound by the same kind of conflict of interest rules that the rest of us are.
Well, and I don't know the specifics, Mark, about how this is set up structurally. In other words, are these typically things are put into a blind trust for the president. Are these things being run by his sons and daughter? I mean, I don't know the legalities of how this is all structured, what Delaware corporations there are, et cetera, et cetera. Let me throw one other piece into this that I think is important, and that is the continuing ongoing debate about Congress and stock trades, okay? And this is something that is coming up again that I think it's so interesting to me. It comes up almost every administration, and it doesn't matter whether Nancy Pelosi was Speaker and about she and her husband or about Republicans. But for some reason, It sort of reminds me of Willie Brown was Speaker of the California Assembly and just couldn't possibly quite get lobbying restrictions in place. I remember challenging him on this, and well, I just can't quite, I got to have other members. I'm like, come on, and so I wanted to throw Congress into the mix because this stock trading thing is not been dealt with. And to me, that is a significant similar concern.
Thank you. That's a tremendous point because you are seeing this moneyed aristocracy in there with all kinds of inside info, and they're allowed to run amok. And both parties do it. And add to that the money in politics, that is to say, the complete unbridled allowance of all of this money pouring into presidential, senatorial, congressional campaigns, a mayoral campaign, whatever it is. There are so many ways to be corrupted by all of this. And so you're right. And sadly, we're going the wrong way on that. So do you see Doge getting access to the Social Security Administration details of so many Americans the way they're trying to get access now?
Yeah, here's my gut feeling about Doge, Mark. I think with Musk's departure and returning basically for the most part to his private sector concerns, getting stuff to Mars, trying to keep kind of keep Tesla charging stations from getting burned to the ground. I mean, all of this. I think Doge. I really honestly believe this. Over the next few months, I think you're going to hear a lot less about Doge. I think sort of the flash has hit the pan. We've sort of reached the apex of it. I really truly believe, like a lot of things in Washington, it has been, to your vernacular today, the true bright, shiny object, right? That's been the subject of so much attention. And I think we're going to be moving on from a lot of this stuff. I would hazard to guess that whether it be Social Security or a whole host of other things, will some of the projects continue? Yes. But will they get the attention of the Oval Office without Musk? I doubt it.
Yeah, and I would say this bright, shiny object was pretty consequential. I mean, dismantling a lot of government and shuttering a bunch of government agencies, firing hundreds of thousands of federal workers. I mean, that was a pretty big a few months they had. But wouldn't you agree with me? What happens first, Gary? That we invade Greenland or that Musk goes to Mars? I put the possibility at zero on both of them.
Well, I told people, listen, I'd be honored to have the invitation. Gary, would you like to be, a media guy that goes to Mars? No, thanks. No. Now, my yellow lab would say, you are not getting on a space capsule for the next 2 years, bro.
Yeah,
That's not going to happen.
We'll have a cocktail and watch the fake launch together. It's not happening for anybody.
Well, it might happen, but it ain't going to happen with me. I'll guarantee you that.
Well, okay. Anyway, you can find Gary across the iHeart Radio network, also across the CBS television stations. And on Monday, he's so gracious to join us here. Gary, thank you, and I look forward to next week as well. Thank you, pal.
Likewise, buddy. Have a great show.
Gary Dietrich, everybody. And Gary's segment is sponsored by Bill Campbell at RE/MAX Gold. If you're relocating to or from Northern California, you should get a highly respected real estate professional. We have that real estate professional for you. It is Bill Campbell of RE/MAX Gold. Call or text him even. Bill's number is 530-448-7474. 530-448-7474. Maybe you're just thinking about moving. Maybe you're thinking about leaving. 530-448-7474. It is Bill Campbell of RE/MAX Gold.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Who's Mark Thompson?
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am wondering what now something was happening while I was talking to Gary, and that is the questions about Jared Yates Sexton. There's a construction going on near where he is.
Yeah.
Is that the deal?
Apparently, out of the blue, this really loud chainsaw started up next door. And so he said, I want to warn you guys, do you still want me to come on? But Tony is thinking that the microphone doesn't always pick up on background noise like that.
Lots of times, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It really is true. I'd say let's give it a try.
Okay.
And if we can't, then we'll reschedule. But he's just such a treasure, Jared Yates Sexton. I really want to get him while we have him scheduled. By the way, just on the trip to Mars, I've made the point before, but you can tell all your friends there's absolutely no way it will happen. I would almost say ever, in even hundreds of years, it won't happen. It's a fool's errand. For Musk, the Mars thing, just because it came up in the conversation with Gary, the Mars thing it's a money thing. There's no chance of going to Mars. The radioactivity alone would kill everybody just on the trip. Leave aside when you're actually there on the planet. Well, we're going to terraform Mars. Do the moon first, dude. Do the moon. That's where you have a chance. That I would take more seriously. But the Mars plan is it's a sci-fi thing. But in his case, it's a sci-fi plan that gets a lot of federal dollars, gets a lot of private dollars. So there's a way to money yourself pursuing this thing that is absolutely never going to happen. 100%. Thank you. Grimm agrees with me. No one is going to Mars ever. You can take that to the bank. Now, wait. So it's a possibility that we'll get to Jared, as you say, and we'll at least try with Jared. We'll give him a ride.
Yeah, I just messaged him back saying, let's do it.
So here, I will take the last living troll with us. This is a legacy troll. Like when somebody's been with you a long time and is always trolling you, I would consider them a legacy troll. And that's this guy, Delwood Kelp, he calls himself. Mark, amazingly ignorant about SpaceX and their real plans, totally uninformed. So I put this in the category of yellow card. And here's why. I'm not throwing you off the platform. I'm not doing anything, Delwood, but I'm telling you, don't tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about unless you give me specifics about how I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't tell me, Mark, amazingly ignorant, incredible, totally uninformed. Yeah, no one knows what they're talking about. Yeah, dude, tell me where I'm wrong. And until you do, you are yellow carded. Yellow carded from this channel.
What? Wait, now, do I have to do anything for yellow card? Doesn't that just mean like warning?
No, yellow card is just a warning. So he's not there. It doesn't affect him in any kind of permanent way. But it annoys me because
you can tell that you're annoyed.
I feel because I do know this area, and I never like to hear a specific. He's throwing heat, but he's not throwing any specifics, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. So
I love it when you're angry.
Okay.
Mouth is cashing a check or something.
Yeah, right. And the kid, your mouth. Yeah, exactly. What she kind of said. Exactly. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy is a great mind on what's happening in America, and I think he was out in front of so much that is going on now, way ahead of many who are talking about it now. I mean, the loss of democracy, the rise of authoritarianism. Jared Yates Sexton, very early to that party. From his website, I like this paragraph because I think it sort of speaks to who he is. To fully understand these strange and dangerous times, Jared Yates Sexton takes a hard look at our nation's history, namely the abuses committed by those in power, the comforting stories that shape the way the West has viewed itself up to the present, as reactionaries and authoritarians cling to myths about, quote, Western civilization. We talk a lot about that on the show. The Midnight Kingdom is just one of his books. He has a regular Substack. I support all of his endeavors as best I can. I think he's a great mind. How about it for Jared Yates Sexton, everybody? Hello,
Mark,
sir.
Such a kind introduction. And meanwhile, I've got the Civilian Conservation Corps outside, wielding more chainsaws than I knew existed in the world.
I was warned that we have chainsaw noise, but Tony, who's kind of a ninja when it comes to this sort of thing, says the microphones now oddly won't pick it up much of the time. But we'll try to ride herd over it. If it gets out of hand, we'll reschedule.
Here's hoping, because I've been looking forward to this conversation, and then the small army descended on my neighbor's house. So thank you as always. It's good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, it is great to see you. Look, I see this train getting to kind of runaway status, and you know how I feel. I think this coup is about complete. I see this rise of authoritarianism sort of having risen in many ways. But your takes are even sharper than that. I wonder if you can speak to it.
Mark, I think one of the things is because we're living in these really unprecedented moments in our lifetimes, we have to understand it through analogies. And the idea of a train, and you think about a train that, like, you watch a movie where like the brake breaks, right? And there's no ability to slow it down. And as things speed up, there's more and more of an opportunity for that train to derail. And that's what's happening right now is all of these brakes that are supposed to be there, these institutional guardrails, they've been exposed as not just rotten and corrupted, but in many cases, non-existent. I mean, we've now seen the president of the United States of America in the modern era completely ignore the Supreme Court. Not that I even respect the legitimacy of the Supreme Court, but to see it happen and to keep watching every single day as there is one more sort of testing of the systems and to see that they are lacking and that they're incapable. I completely agree. We are on a runaway train at this point, and it's on all of us to slow it down.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you do on your Substack. You, I think, bring people through beat by beat what's happening. You almost break everything that's going down into sort of sectors of concern. And then, to your credit, you do point to ways in which we can do something and there might be a way out of it. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and I appreciate you noticing that. I'm a former professor, so a lot of the ways that I try and scaffold these things is trying to make it sort of understandable and also start to build off of it. And the other issue with this is that this is so complicated and so weird and so dangerous that if we try and take it all in at once, we are going to be overwhelmed. And that is one of the main weapons of authoritarianism is weaponized abuse and to overwhelm the individual. And I want to say to the people who are watching and listening to this, the way that you're feeling is valid because you are in a dangerous situation that is intended to overwhelm you. So we have to pay attention to that while also breaking it down to understand where the opportunities are. And so I keep trying to explain this, which is we're in a very dangerous time and every day brings new horrors, but we also have to understand that there is always an equal and opposite reaction to what authoritarians do. And we're seeing that as the backlash builds, not just in terms of protest, but in terms of like sliding poll numbers. There's always authoritarian overreach in which, I don't know, they try and disappear children out of nowhere. And people feel it and they see it and they recognize that this is evil and this is wrong. So basically what we have to come to understand is what this thing is and our own role in a small d democratic society in terms of understanding how it is that we can come together to start to effectively break this train and start to head it in a different direction because we actually do have the power. The entire point of this onslaught is to make us feel alone and powerless, but we're not.
So when you talk about those things that are being done by this authoritarian regime, this rising authoritarian crew, and you even sort of maybe allude to the deportation of mother and child with cancer, 4-year-old child with cancer, without any accounting for medications that the child needs, et cetera. Not to mention the legality, which it really runs afoul of. Do these things then begin to pick up a kind of momentum of their own? That is to say, these heinous acts, people look at that and they kind of recoil from that. I mean, that's a rough one. You know, they can put whatever spin they want on the guy they send to El Salvador. Well, he was a wife beater, he was this, he was that. But it's hard to put a spin on a 4-year-old kid with cancer or this child with cancer the way they did. Do these things then ultimately, these authoritarians fall of their own weight? Or when you say we need to do something, is it just exposing these stories to the point that there is enough momentum to block them?
Well, it's a process of dehumanization. And we've seen it take place. I mean, I try and make it very clear that Trump is a symptom of a larger disease. And, we're about 20 years out now from the war on terror, in which we saw people being randomly killed by the United States of America, but they weren't in America. Right? We saw it happen around the world on our behalf, so to speak, actually on the behalf of corporations, but we were roped into it. And so as that occurs in the periphery, we're supposed to feel differently about human life. If they label someone a terrorist, they deserve to die. If someone's a criminal, they deserve whatever happens to them. And you can't have this current state that we're dealing with, including concentration camps being built around the country, and also this bizarre corporate outsourcing of a carceral state that's been growing in this country for a while. So what happens is when you see a child with cancer being disappeared, when you see a judge being arrested at a courthouse. It's a message to the rest of us that says we can get anybody at any given time at any given moment. It's whatever we want to do. And what that does is it begins to install a dictator in our heads. There's this idea when you look at like past fascist movements or Nazi movements or whatever it is, the brain tells you that there's a gun trained on everybody, right? That at all given moments you are under the barrel of the gun and under the heel of the boot. But what happens is these examples, they're supposed to say to you, hey, you have a choice here, which is you either shut up and you allow this to happen, or else you're going to end up in El Salvador, or you stand up and say that this is wrong, and you risk ending up on a flight to CCOT or wherever wherever they've set up for us in the future. Alcatraz now, right? So while that happens, we are facing a moral and ethical crisis of the individual, which is, do we just turn away? Do we shut it off? Do we not pay attention? Do we go ahead and lie low so that we don't get violence visited upon us? Or do we listen to the moral tuning fork of the soul? And we say that this is more than enough. And eventually that will either reach a precipice where we will either back down and sort of allow this to happen because we're afraid, or we'll stand up and risk danger and violence and threats in order to say, you know what, enough is enough. We're not going to deal with this anymore, and something has to change.
I wonder about the distraction element that is built into this administration. Particularly, you have a showman as the empty vessel that is sort of the empty vessel to all these corporate interests, to the oligarchical interests that really control things. And he himself, while an empty vessel, not really aware of anything, not aware of history, not aware of geopolitics, not aware of economics, clearly, he still has these reflexive movements that then, utterances over the weekend, everybody scrambles to yes sir him and to jump on it. One of the things I worry about with all that, and just with this kind of basic disposition he has, is the adventurism that I feel he is expressing with tariffs that might also be expressed with the American military overseas. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's really helpful we have to do weird things in these situations because it's a weird situation. We both have to focus and unfocus on Trump. We have to understand the elements of Trump as an individual that makes this possible, which is that he has created a cult around himself, right? What is wrong with Trump, which is almost everything, is a reflection of what's wrong in American culture. There are a lot of people in this country who are caught in the thrall of a power self-destructive cult. That's why MAGA works, right? And what has actually happened, and you started to touch on it, which is that cult has now been bought by an oligarchical class. They paid for it in full, whether it was through billions in crypto or the couple $100 million, that Elon Musk passed him in order to get JD Vance as the VP and total control of the government. And so what happens in this is the relationship between the dictator and the oligarchical class. It's weird and it flexes. There are moments where one person has sort of more influence. There's a moment where another person, they sort of tussle for control all the time. And the hard part about it is when you have such a failure of a person like Donald Trump ahead of this thing, not only does he enjoy the religious faith of his cultist, but he is very liable at any given moment to be on a live mic and say, hey, guess what? We're going to Greenland tomorrow. Right? We're going to be in Panama tomorrow. Or he might get involved in some sort of a personality conflict with, Xi Jinping. And we don't know exactly where that will lead, but it is a tenuous relationship between the dictator and the oligarchical class. And it just so happens that Donald Trump is one of the most intellectually incurious, self-dealing individuals you could ever imagine. And every time he opens his mouth, there is a possibility that this thing will get wilder and more dangerous because he's so undisciplined and also self-obsessed. So this is a weird back and forth that we see grow with every single day.
Yeah, and he likes to make news. He likes pronouncements. He likes the theater of being president and of getting that attention. And so you're right, that can manifest itself in a benign way, or it can manifest itself in a really scary way. Do you see the adversarial relationship that we've now developed? We've always had an adversarial relationship with China on some level, but there's been engagement with China in ways that have been productive. Do you see the new relationship that Trump has created with China Well, how do you game that out? How do you see that going?
Well, it's another strange situation because we are effectively in a second Cold War at this point. And it was always going to happen as China became more and more ascendant. And we've seen that. Like, members of both parties have saber rattled against China, and basically among the political and the punditry class, it's basically accepted at this point that we're going to have a war with China, which is what happens when you have an empire that suddenly has a new challenger. And the American empire is in decline, and empires in decline, they get increasingly more and more desperate. But there's a weird thing that's happening here as well, which is the authoritarianism in America is not isolated. It has American characteristics, but it's also borrowing. It's almost how you see a melting pot of, like these neighborhoods that like start having like different cultures that rub against one another. The American authoritarian sort of system that we're starting to have, it's both inherently American. It has parts of Russia. It has parts of Hungary. And they are so obsessed, and this is one of the more frightening aspects, they are so obsessed with what China has created for itself. And the surveillance state, the sort of like weird capitalism, controlled capitalism parts. So effectively what's happening at this point is that America looks at China, it sees it as a threat to its hegemony, but at the same time, they sort of look at it and they say, hey, that's what we need for ourselves. So there is both the chance that at any given moment, and when these sort of empires start to break apart, things get very weird. And they start getting very turbulent. So there is the possibility that we could be at war with any of these countries at any given moment, but we're also information sharing in terms of how to build that surveillance state. And I think it's important to point out for people who are listening, the surveillance state in China was effectively partly created by the same tech oligarchs that are currently creating ours. And they've exported that technology, that information, and those strategies. So what's happening is we're becoming more like those countries while also having like this weird turbulent relationship with them as America declines.
Wow. Yeah, that's so fascinating. We kind of have China envy when
Right.
it comes to so much of this, even as we are on adversarial footing. And you're right. I mean, I just saw that the big government contract goes to, is it Palantir, the Teal? It's this handful of people controlling so much worldwide. So the idea of a pushback, of institutional pushback, is, I think it dovetails with your notion, which is something that I've crowed about for a long time, and it's not even original to us, I don't think, that this myth of American exceptionalism has, in a way, created a complacency with us feeling, well, the institutions will hold up. They held up the first time. I mean, J6 was a real problem, and still, the ship of state didn't sink. And so there's this sense that we have these remarkable institutions. And I love that you speak to how weak these institutions are, because they're made up of people. They're not independent of the individuals who inhabit them.
That's right. And the institutions in the United States of America from their very beginning were decidedly and purposefully anti-democratic. The thing that we don't understand about American history, and it gets paved over whenever like all these books get banned and we start talking about a patriotic education, we don't understand that the American story is a battle between authoritarianism and democracy. And that the things that we've enjoyed and taken for granted, including protections, liberties, freedoms, all of those were hard fought and hard won. And so they do have moments where they move back and forth. So the story of America that most people have is a mythology. It has absolutely no relationship to the actual dynamics about how America has worked. And people who will say this isn't who we are, this is who we are. And it's who we've been, and it's who we've been in recent history, if you even take a look at it accurately. And so what we're talking about now is we can't become conservative. Like 2016, when Trump originally got elected, it couldn't happen if it wasn't for the war on terror. All of these executive orders couldn't happen except for the fact that the parties kept giving more and more authoritarian powers to the presidency. And this was a long, long haul, not to mention neoliberalism and one sort of consensus after another that created the oligarchical class that's now doing this. We can't just keep fighting to conserve what it is that we had before Trump, what little remains of it. We have to take a look at what wasn't working, and we have to fight for something that is not just different, but quite frankly, Mark, we deserve better than what we had before Trump. It wasn't enough. It was scraps. And at this point, if we're going to get out of this situation, and history tells us this, you have to create an alternative that actually makes people's lives better, as opposed to saying, guess what, we're better than this person. And we deserve so much more than that.
You know, Trump is that transformational figure for the extreme right. I don't know if there's an ascendant transformational figure coming up on the other side. Do you see anyone? Maybe I'm so blinded by sort of traditional politics that it's hard for me to, to see who might be an ascendant figure like that.
I keep calling this a moment of clarity. Because, in the past, whatever political stances you took, you could kind of massage it a little bit. You could be like, well, I would love to be able to do that, but the money's not there. Or, yeah, if everything was perfect, we could do that. All of a sudden now, in a time of great pressure and great crisis, we're seeing who people really are. I mean, look at how Gavin Newsom has responded to this. He's like, yeah, absolutely, a terrible time. Hey, Steve Bannon, it's great to talk, right? Or, even like Gretchen Whitmer, it's like going into the Oval Office and like showing yourself hiding behind binders. Meanwhile, there are people who are now walking the walk and talking the talk. Lately, I've been very enthused about J.B. Pritzker, who seems to understand what's going on in this country. And I think the people who are revealing that they actually care about not just the state of the country, but about the individual lives of people. We can't keep making deals where we're like, yeah, you know what, I support that group, but we really, that's not going to poll well, right? That's going to cost us this state or that state. It's time to see an actual resistance that isn't just identity, like sort of, I'm a resistor, here are the memes that I share. Right. Like there's skin in the game now. And people are going to have to risk the consequences of the authoritarian system you and I have been talking about. And the people who are starting to speak out are showing great courage, and great leadership comes from great courage. And so I am starting to see people who are doing that. And quite frankly, and I know your audience is part of this, you see the vast majority of the American public wants that. They desperately want something different, and they desperately want people to fight. So it's not just a courage of like staying away from, this violence or whatever. It's also about recognizing that there's a great thirst among the American populace that needs and wants and desperately craves somebody who's going to do the fighting for them.
There was a question that came up, Jared Yates Sexton, and it came up in the chat today. And I kind of answered it quickly because we were in a time bind, but I want to pose it to you and just explore it for a second. Sure. And that is, will there be another U.S. election? And this is obviously they're talking about a general election, I guess. And I said, of course there will be. There are elections in Russia, there are elections in China, there are elections everywhere. They're just like there are courthouses everywhere and judges in all of these countries also. The question is the legitimacy of those things and these institutions, including the election. I wonder if you could speak to that question.
Well, I want to say two things on that, because I think that's one of the great questions of our moment. First things first is the idea of managed democracy or illiberal democracy, which is what we've seen in Russia and Hungary especially, which is where you have a system, some people refer to it as competitive authoritarianism, which is where you have a strong authoritarian party. They allow elections to happen, but quite frankly, nobody believes them. Right? Like you see the numbers come out and you're like, oh, great, Vladimir Putin got 97% of the vote, which that 3% is actually sort of a gift from Vladimir Putin. It's almost, like spitting in people's faces. Right. So I will say that is a possibility. And I say that's a possibility because I keep seeing people who are in the middle of this authoritarian crisis who keep looking for 2026, who keep looking for 2028. And what I tell people in my organizing, when I'm trying to get people to do this fight, I say, you cannot rely on those things. Like maybe they will happen. And if so, that's the cherry on top. That's the bonus. But we have to fight like every single day from one day to the next is the last day that we have to fight. And you can't rely on those things. We've already seen Trump and the people around him have started to eat away at the barriers of voting and protections and all of these things. And they've been doing it for years. So I think there's a very real possibility that we'll have elections, but I don't think that you can have faith that these things are going to be what saves us. And I think that's one of the things that's held the Democratic Party back so far. And a lot of the people who, quite frankly, should be in the streets at this point is a faith that those elections are going to go off unfettered, which I don't think you can say at this point.
You know, I can even make the argument that the last election, you know, he takes all the swing states. There's a lot I thought that was curious about that. And we've had Greg Palast on a couple of times. I think he's done some decent reporting on disenfranchisement of voters, and there's been real voter suppression in this country. It's been a high art in certain states, but I think it can be taken to an even more dangerous level, and likely with the Trump people in control of so much, even when it comes to states. And I think maybe, Jared, there's some high ground in that all the states run their own elections. So maybe there's a possibility of greater legitimacy that way. But I think now the MAGA world has infiltrated even those state elections, and I have great anxieties about the legitimacy of the next election.
Well, you know, I had all these conversations after 2020, and I'm sure you remember this as well. After the 2020 election, all of these so-called red states held all these audits. They had all kinds of weird people going in and looking at the numbers and looking at the machinery, more or less. And I said, they're trying to figure out, they're not looking for fraud. They're trying to reverse engineer this thing to understand what to do with it. And I think us having this conversation, we're not having a wild-eyed conspiracy theory conversation. You know, I'd be slamming my fist and saying, obviously this happened. But the fact that we're talking about it, it betrays something, which is we have a reason to wonder whether or not our elections are free and fair as they stand. And that should be a barometer of where we are in this situation. And I have to tell you, point blank, you look at the authoritarian right, and I've read their writing. I live and swim in this stuff, unfortunately, and they even admit that if they could do it, they would. That should be enough for us to understand that we need to have election integrity and really take big steps for this, but also have in the back of our minds that we're no longer playing a political game. We're no longer talking about electoral colleges and political strategies. We're literally talking about a group that has openly espoused how much they want to destroy democracy, and they've said as much. So the fact that we're even having this conversation, it should tell people exactly where we are on the scale at this point.
Yeah, it's such a great point that the notion that if we could, we would, and we might type thing, because they view it as they're wrestling for the soul of America. You know, their view is it's informed by a religiosity, isn't it? I mean, either a literal religiosity, I mean, that is to say the alt-right religious nationalism, or just a religiosity, a fervor that informs the MAGA nation.
Yeah, you know, Mark, one of the big aha moments for me was I reread Bill Cooper's Behold the Pale Horse. And for people who don't know Bill Cooper, he was the original Alex Jones. And Behold the Pale Horse is one of the great conspiratorial books of like the 20th century. And I reread it as I was writing The Midnight Kingdom, and a passage really hit me in the chest. And he said, I know that there are conspiracies because if I was in a position of power, I would enter a conspiracy in order to keep my power. And what we're talking about here is a projection. And what we've been dealing with the right wing is a group of people who, by the way, hate themselves. That's what's happening in this. They hate the parts of themselves that have, like, they feel gross about. They feel like, betray their principles. And what happens, and psychology tells us this, they project it on the rest of the world. And so every time they talk about these conspiracy theories, they're actually confessions about what it is that they would do. And just a quick example of this, Mark, the entire basis of the right-wing authoritarian project is they're hurting the children. We have to save the children. Look what they're doing to the children. Look what they're doing to the children. They're taking away their education. They're taking away their vaccines. And on top of that, if that's not enough, and on top of disappearing them, what are they doing? They're preparing them for labor. They are rewriting all of these laws to put children back, and they're already there, but they're wanting more of them in, slaughterhouses and factories and mines, just like they did during the Gilded Age. So what actually is occurring here is that everything that is behind their conspiracy theories, you can kind of extrapolate that that's where they're going to take things.
Sure.
And actually, it's been almost one for one. Everything the right has said that so-called deep staters and liberals are doing, they're actually doing it themselves. Indoctrination, taking away rights, talking about jailing people, sending them away. Like, it's a confession and it's a projection.
Yeah, the shakedown that's gone on with the legal profession from the Trumps is an extraordinary thing. The capitulation, I think, from these legal firms is an extraordinary thing. It speaks to what you're talking about, which is the fear and sort of money comes first. These are corporate law firms, a lot of money at stake. But that's just part of what's going on. The suing of the media, one by one, picking media networks off, and then going after the courts. I mean, this is so, and I would say, isn't that the trio of things that authoritarians go for when they're trying to take over a country?
Yeah, because they're trying to warp all of these things into tools and weapons at their disposal. And they use sort of these fracture points. And we're seeing it with higher ed. We're seeing all of these universities, supposedly the bastion of liberal indoctrination. Actually, these are little corporations, right? That's what they've always been. And they have all these administrators there who are absolutely happy to do these things. We'll do a little professional wrestling match. We don't want this. Oh, we'll do this. That's fine. And we're actually seeing what happens with authoritarian capture, which is you intimidate everybody that you possibly can. You invite in as much corruption as you possibly can. It's the carrot and the stick, which is join us. We'll make you powerful. We'll make you wealthy. The stick is if you don't do this, we will sue you. We'll withhold funds or whatever it is. And what's really scary about this, Mark, is we don't know the history of it because it's not taught in our schools. This is how every authoritarian regime has acted. What we're actually watching right now is not an aberration. This is a game plan. And it's been studied. And you can look at every major right-wing authoritarian movement, and this is exactly how they operate until they capture all of those institutions. And then the moment that they capture them, they're all tools and they're all weapons.
Yeah. So it's the playbook. It's absolutely the playbook. And so I was encouraged to see that a handful of law firms were bound together to fight back and push back on the Trump attack on the law and law firms. I feel like in the collective, Jared Yates Sexton, there is more power than there is with these individual institutions trying to punch back.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here is solidarity. And one of the lessons I hope people walk away from this learning or understanding is this. When you are, as a collective, facing the authoritarian threat, you can defeat it. These people are weak. And what do we see every time somebody stands up against them? Eventually they fold because actually authoritarianism is acting out of weakness. But what happens is a divide and conquer strategy. Every single individual link in the chain of the institutions that we're talking about, they have to stand firm. And what I just talked about a while ago about that fear of whether or not you're going to get involved or whether or not you're going to stand back, everybody has to make that choice within themselves. And and law firms are part of it. Workplaces are another part. People have to stand with each other and not betray one another, which is what this culture has taught us to do. Look out for number one, take care of yourself, don't trust anybody. This is a sociopathic culture. We have to learn how to trust one another and engage in not just solidarity, but intimacy. We have to unlearn the authoritarian impulses that laid the groundwork for this thing, or else it's the old idea. We either, we all stand together or we all hang separately. And that's more or less what we're facing right now.
Although, Jared, it's remarkable to me how the divisions within America have been exposed, and perhaps the divisiveness is more divisive than ever.
Yeah, I think two things are happening there because I'm doing a lot of work, this organizing and sort of bringing things together. And Mark, the wild thing about it, that division is actually a veneer. If you actually dig down underneath all of these sort of conspiracy theories and cultural divides, which, by the way, are all paid for by wealth class boosted institutes, think tanks, they're the ones who create sort of the divisive issues of the time. If you actually drill down, there is a huge consensus in this country. Take an issue like abortion, which is one of the more divisive things of our culture. Roughly 75 to 80% of Americans agree on this issue. It's just diverted by the way that it's framed. So once you start realizing that this type of stuff, the funding of education, the opposition to people like Elon Musk and the oligarchs, this entire situation, the majority of people agree. It's simply about moving beyond those storylines that have been created by the wealthy. And once you get past that, you realize we're actually historically unified. It's just when you start talking, when you start coming together, you realize that you have power together as opposed to the idea that we're completely separate at this point.
That's fascinating. That really is fascinating. All right, last thing relates to an op-ed I was reading from, I think, Kamala Harris's #2 guy who wrote an op-ed for the New York Times. And it was pretty good. It's kind of ironic that it was in the New York Times because it was sort of about how the messaging in politics now can't exist in the world of the New York Times, the Washington Post, traditional mainstream media. It has to, the messaging from, of course, he's concerned with Democrats, has to now get out into other ways to get messages across. The messaging itself has to be chosen carefully, and then how the message is communicated, that has to be done in ways that are far different than the old school media. I know you feel strongly about this, and I wonder if you could speak about it.
Yeah, I think this is one of the more important things that we realize. First things first, what is the New York Times? What's the Washington Post? What are they concerned with, Mark? They are concerned with keeping things the way that they are and maybe allowing a little bit of authoritarianism, if it helps the market. That's the big giant thing here. And what do we keep seeing? They blame the quote unquote left the same way that they blame the right, and then they end up normalizing the right. It's a game that they continually play. The Democratic Party cannot continue to go down that path. They can't continue to means test. They can't continue to rely on all of these tried and true pollsters. By the way, James Carville should be ashamed of himself.
Agreed.
As people are being thrown in prison, as people are being erased, he says, oh, we should take this out and wait for a better opportunity. No. You need to understand at this point, and this might sound extreme, but I don't think it is at all. This administration has broken so many laws at this point and has committed so many crimes against humanity that if somebody wants to run for office, these people need to be held accountable for those crimes. And on top of that, what does everybody hate? Everybody hates oligarchs hoarding resources and wealth and taking over the government. You have to speak out against that. You can't continue to use these people as donors and funders and be afraid of making them terrified and taking your base for granted. The Democratic Party has to give up on this idea that they have to become more like the Republican Party, and they need to start just telling the truth. They need to just call this what it is and start offering solutions. And that's not what I'm hearing from a lot of political leaders at this point, because those solutions terrify people like the New York Times and the Washington Post and the moderates and the billionaires who fund all of this. So start talking to people, start talking about class differences, exploitation, and give them a vision for a better future. That's what people want at this point. This isn't just a crisis of democracy. It's a crisis of faith and hope and direction. And if they could give something else, like they would reap the benefits.
Well, witness the crowds that turned out for Bernie and AOC.
That's right.
I mean, it's pretty incredible. Jared Yates Sexton, as I said, the Substack, you must subscribe, as I do, support him in all of his endeavors. And you have 3 books, I think, don't you? I want to say, there it is, Dispatches from a Collapsing State. That's Jared Yates Sexton. And the website is, what is the website? Jared Yates, tell me, Jared.
Jared Yates Sexton.substack.com. That's where you can find it.
And there it is, The Midnight Kingdom, and his works. I don't know. I think you write so well, you communicate so well. I won't embarrass you by flattering you further, but I will just say it's a delight always to read your stuff, and even a greater delight to talk to you. So thanks for coming through.
Mark, you are so kind, and I really appreciate you being in this fight.
All the best, my friend. Jared Yates Sexton, everybody. Salam.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Right on, everybody. Right on. He's great, isn't he? Just terrific. I love him. Now, where are we, Kim? I've lost a little bit of time, I think, but I thought we were having a great conversation, so I didn't want to cut it short.
Totally great conversation. We have Karen Dawn with Dawn Watch, who is next on the docket.
Of course, she is a star in her own right. Before I
Absolutely.
get to Karen, I want to recognize this is Spring Ka Ching. It's our big fundraising push, and I thank everyone who is part of Spring Ka Ching. This channel needs your help now more than ever. And girl, baby girl, don't even play.
Don't even play.
Jackie Walker, $50 super sticker. Come on.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to Jackie Walker. Also, a cool way to spell Jackie. Jackee. I'm way into names, and I love that. Dillette with a very cool name, as well as being an OG of this show. $50. Delette Ziegelman Jackson, thank you. Wow. Got to keep the show going, she says. We love you guys. From Harper, my service dog, Phoebe and Una, my ragdoll kitties, and Augustus and Agatha, my Maine Coons. What a terrific house full of wonderful, warm life. Keep up the good work, says Delette. Thank you, Delette. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's really cool. Shelley Pollard with another cool spelling. SHELLE. Yeah. Last name with a double L as well. I love it. Can't get enough. Go back to Shelley for a second, please. $50 super sticker. Come on.
Big shout out
to Shelley Pollard. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Really do appreciate it. For our Spring Ka Ching, Dennis Fahey, set your dial to 810. KGO News Talk Radio 81. I know. We miss it. We really do. This is a shadow of KGO. And we appreciate you, Dennis, the $25. Thank you, my friend.
Shout out.
Big shout out to you. Thank you, everybody who has fallen in with us. Judy Lyons with a $20 super chat says Social Security payments to retired people has been reduced by a third for May. Is that right?
And I looked it up and I did not find anything indicating that is the case.
I don't know about that, Judy. I think that would have made my radar too. I hope that's not true.
But I saw her chat and I looked it up and I couldn't find that. So
thank you for checking it, Kim. I do think that there are changes to Social Security. It's offensive because we've all paid into the Social Security system. It's a wildly popular system, and they have hobbled it already with a lot of Social Security, as you know, layoffs and shuttering a lot of offices nationwide. So it's a real issue. But I haven't seen that the checks have been reduced by any amount. No. So you'll have to send us something on that. If you do have any information, it's the Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com. Yeah. How can Trump handle everything everywhere all at once, says Vilma. Trump wants his evil fingers in every aspect of life in the U.S., says Vilma. Well, it sounds like you're not a fan of Trump, if I can say that, Vilma. Thank you for the $5 super chat. And you are an OG of this show. Really do appreciate. This quick comment from A.E. Lopez. Is it true that J6 folks are getting hired to work as Homeland Security? Here's the story on that as I understand it thus far. The J6 people have met with certain Homeland Security people and certain people from the MAGA world who are in the administration. It's not clear to me yet that any of them have been dispatched to any kind of Homeland Security post. That doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. As I told you, when he first pardoned the J6 people, what did I say? I said, these people are now part of a militia that realizes they can do whatever with total impunity. And this guy is a guy that they are going to perhaps go to fight for. Certainly Proud Boys, the 3%ers, et cetera, they fall into that category. So watch for them. Calling them brown shirts or whatever, they're in a way a militia, a growing militia, potentially. I mean, again, it hasn't happened yet, but it is worth watching. So that's where I see J6 and the most militant participants of J6 falling into the future, but it has not, at least to my knowledge, it has not happened yet. Cousin Erie with a $10 super chat says, I wish I could do better, but joining executive branch has really hit my wallet.
Yeah, that $500,000, that's killing you.
Yeah. The executive branch is that private club. It's $500,000 to join at the top tier level. And I guess there are other tiers where it's not quite as expensive, but it's still quite a few dollars. And I heard some people talking about it who are, close to Trump and they're in the administration and they like to go someplace where they don't have to worry about speaking out loud about those things that the administration is working on. So it's nice that they have that, and you got to pay a price for that. So again, thanks for being part of Spring Ka Ching, everybody. It's our big spring fundraiser. This sadly, the ad revenue from YouTube it's fallen like a stone. And it's owing to a lot of things, but really appreciate those people who value this channel and value these conversations stepping up and helping us through this spring fund drive that we call Spring Ka Ching. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
once a month, we do something we should probably do more than once a month, which is we look at this wonderful world of animals, and we do it in a segment that we call A Word About Animals.
Now, a word about animals on the Mark Thompson Show.
And our guide through the word about animals is the great Karen Dawn from Dawn Watch. You can find her. Dawn Watch is a daily animal news resource, I guess is the word I would call it. That's one word I could use. And you can find it on Facebook. You can also find it across the web. But you're such, I subscribe, so I get it to my email automatically. So as a result, I need to worry about going to Facebook or finding anything. And you focus on a New York Times piece, Karen. I wonder if you could speak to that.
I could, but as usual, Mark, I'm going to sort of knock you off your feet there a little bit because this
now I see why we only do it once a month. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
I am definitely going to share Margaret Renkel's latest New York Times piece. But after I sent that to you guys this morning, I suddenly realized that, and it's totally relevant, is that since I saw you last, the Pope died. And he
was a friend to animals, for sure.
Oh, my word. Well, he chose the name of Pope Francis of Assisi, who is best known for his relationship with animals. And his very first encyclical, which is this huge essay they write, and they thank you, Tony, for that. I sent that along to Tony after when I realized this. The encyclical he wrote, which is this first major issue he addresses, was about the environment. He called it an encyclical on the environment, but it was very specifically about animals. And some of the language he used was profound and groundbreaking. And I'm going to share just a little bit of that because it's so like the way that Margaret Renkel, who I did warn you I was going to talk about, and I didn't mention I was going to talk about the Pope, but she has a similar way of looking at things. And it's a way that I also look at things, and I just want to share it. It's funny when people ask me if I'm involved in, if they learn that I'm an animal rights activist, which is what I do with what I've chosen to do with my life. Sometimes they'll say, are you vegan? And well, yes, of course I'm vegan because I'm a full-time animal rights activist. This is what I do with my life. But do I think that means that in order to care about animal rights and veganism is the moral baseline? No, actually, there are famous men in our movement who've said that. Whereas, of course, and I know that you're vegan, bless you for that, because you care so deeply about these issues. But it's funny, I had the most beautiful conversation just yesterday with a wonderful woman who I'd love to see on your show, actually, named Priya. She's local to you up in the Bay Area, or to many people on this show up in the Bay Area, who was one of the heads of DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, for years. And they were the first group, and they've been, members of the group have been arrested for all sorts of actions. They were the first group to say, this isn't about making more vegans. This is about changing the way that people in society view animals. And of course, ideally, eventually, we want a vegan world. But at the moment, I think we've been at 3% for about 20 years now. So we might want to look at a different kind of focus.
Yeah, I mean, meat eating is going up all around the world. I want to go back to the Pope because I thought it was really great that you referenced it and you sent it, because what he actually said.
Right back there.
Yeah, what he said was we are not God. Now we must forcefully reject the notion that our being created in God's image and given dominion over the earth justifies absolute domination over other creatures. I mean, what a wonderful thing to say. Clearly, the Bible has no place for a tyrannical anthropocentrism.
And that's what I really want to talk about with you.
Yeah, which is the unconcern for other creatures is what he says. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, not at all. That's those words. I've mentioned them to you before on the show, that occasionally you've, when anybody says anything about anthropomorphism, I get quite annoyed because, yes, very occasionally we might actually give emotions to animals that, when they don't actually have them. But far more often, we are pretending animals don't have pretty much exactly the same emotions that we do. And anybody who's ever lived with a dog or a cat, I mean, you just learn that they might not think exactly the same way they do, but they pretty much feel like we do. And I've mentioned before the word anthropomorphism, anthropocentrism. And honestly, it's a word that almost never, ever comes up, this idea that we think that we are the center of the universe. So to have it come up from the Pope, going out to literally billions of people throughout the world, this is a man who really, really wanted to change the way we think about other species. So the loss of him is profound. We can only pray that he is replaced by somebody else who gives a darn about what happens to other species and about the anthropocentrism that our species tends to rely on, and which we feel is giving us permission to destroy the earth and destroy all the other animals on the earth, which is going to destroy ourselves. Well.
One of the problems I have with religion generally is that this notion of dominion. I mean, it's an awful word. You really wish that religion was more about conserving and responsible conservation of these gifts that we've been given, these natural gifts, even if you view them as given from the divine. Don't you think we have a responsibility to conserve them? All of these things, all of these animals, all of these environs, all of these habitats, these are beautiful things given to us, and we have a responsibility to conserve them, to sustain them. And so I always had a problem with the dominion over the earth. That, man, it's what you're talking about, that anthropocentrism. Now, can you take me?
No, not yet. I have to respond to that.
I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
First, I have to say amen in honor of the Pope and everything we're talking about. Then I have to mention, you say that dominion is a bad word. Depending how it's used, I think now of Matthew Scully's gorgeous book, Dominion, The Power of Man, the Suffering of Animals, and the Call to Mercy. One of the most beautiful books ever written. If you have any Catholic listeners or people whose family are Catholic and they wish they cared more about animals, Dominion is the book to give them.
Oh, I'll make a note of it. I'm sorry.
Are you not familiar with Matthew Scully's book, Dominion, Mark? You are always ahead of me on so many of these issues.
Please shame me, everybody, if you would. Yeah, I appreciate
you will love it. It is
fantastic.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
Matthew Scully wrote it while he was in George Bush's White House, and which is just incredible because historically we used to associate animal rights, animal welfare with the left, and Matthew is one of the first prominent people on the right to show true concern about these issues, and his book Dominion is exquisite.
I will pick it up. There it is. Thank you,
Pope. Thank you, Tony. Like the Pope, he doesn't want dominion to get confused with domination. They're really quite different. And, whether it is dominion, whether it is conservation, no matter what name we call it, if we have true concern for other beings, then the world will look quite different. But I think what you're getting at, and now I'd love to move to Margaret Rankle, because this is, I think, what she is something, the way she looks at the world, is dominion suggests that we are higher than other animals and, that it's our job to look after them. And something I always notice in Margaret Rankle's writing, and she's a New York Times columnist. She has a column, I think it comes out every Tuesday. I think the one I'm sharing today, I've sent along a gift link, compliments of Teresa D'Amico, who's the Dawn Watch advisor, actually, which I hope Tony will include when he posts this interview.
Yeah, we'll put it underneath the video.
Beautiful.
Of course.
I think it'll be in print tomorrow, but Margaret Rankle writes regularly about all sorts of things, and she always, a lot of your audience will be happy to hear, she always gives Trump a nice good bash in there. So she's very, on that very upset about what Trump's doing with the environment in particular. And, but very, very often she focuses on wildlife and the way she writes about other animals. And we've shared stuff about turtles, et cetera, from her before, comes from a place of a circle of life, and this is something I talk about, is a circle of life rather than a hierarchy of life. And just this assumption that other animals matter, perhaps as much as we do. I certainly say as much as we do, and whether or not you think it's equal or you just think they matter, we'd have to change. To acknowledge they matter would mean changing the way human society treats them a lot. This particular piece is called I Break for Robins. And thank you, Tony, for sharing that there. And she talks about how in springtime, she's always so concerned that there's so much new life everywhere. And then basically we have put roads through their habitat, and then we drive so fast that we're mowing them down in their own habitat. So she talks about robins who fly so low to the ground and that she breaks for them, and our need in general to look after them. And today's piece it's beautifully written. And there was one part of it I don't know, Tony, if you got the last quote I sent along, but I wanted to share this. I can put on I know you have credibility glasses, Mark. I have Prue glasses from the
those are very cool.
Do you watch the Fabulous British Baking Show, or no?
I don't. Is that required viewing before this segment from now on?
It's not required vegan viewing, but I bet a lot of folks will know exactly who Prue is, and with my orange glasses matching my orange outfit here. But she talks about wildlife-friendly changes that all of us can make, and I'm sure lots of people listening to this show live in apartment buildings, so don't have gardens that they can change, and if you live in an apartment building, gosh, folks, at least when it's hot, put a bowl of water out on your balcony or on your patio or in your windowsill, please, and put a little stick in it from the bottom of the bowl to the side of the bowl, so that if anybody accidentally falls in there, they can get out again.
That's very clever.
I've made the awful mistake of leaving a big glass bowl out and finding a little drowned frog in there the next morning. You've got to make sure that there's a way out, but just leaving a bowl of water out can make a big difference. But she has a beautiful garden, and she talks about the importance of doing things like planting native flowers rather than whatever flowers you might happen to be in the mood for, because the wildlife in your neighborhood rely on those native flowers. And I'm going to read out what she says because it's just so important. She says, wildlife-friendly changes and how we manage our yards and public spaces include choosing native plants that provide food and habitat for native species, protecting insects by building a brush pile, leaving the leaves where they fall, and waiting till full spring after nighttime temperatures have reached at least 50 degrees for 2 straight weeks to clean up the garden. It can mean protecting everybody, human beings and wildlife alike, by skipping the herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and synthetic fertilizers. And then I love this bit about, we're always so worried it reminds me of the Joni Mitchell song, Leave Me, I don't care about spots on my apples, just leave me the birds and the bees. She says, we need to recognize that an insect-chewed leaf is not a sign of damage, but a sign of life. Some hungry creature is eating the leaf, which means that some other hungry creature has insects to eat, and the wild world is behaving exactly as it evolved to behave. I just love that whole circle of life thing that she's putting forward.
That is terrific. That really is terrific. Couple of comments for you on the way out. I will check that book out, says Zero Sum. There you go.
Beautiful.
Dominion can also mean or connote caretaking, says Mary Lynn Young. Well, look, I don't want to get in a big argument about it. It sounds to me like Dominion was the name of this great book, and it's all about I'm going to read it and I'm going to get it. But let me just state it for everybody straight. I'm not going to die on this hill, but Dominion is about control. Dominion means control. Okay, so don't tell me that you use the word dominion, but somehow it also means anything else but control. Now, you can have control and also be concerned with conservation and sustainability, but the word dominion implies that kind of sovereign control over something. So that's kind of why I got off on that. But But yeah,
And
I
nobody
love that.
minds you getting off on it.
I love that it could be caretaking also under that, Mary. Yeah. And
I'm
Inlay
going to
says, we have dominion means we should take care of the whole of the world's plants and animals as we are entrusted to take care of them, says Inlays. Yeah.
Mark, I'm going to, the book's called Dominion, but again, the subtitle of the book is right in line with what you're saying. The first thing is the power of man. It's dominion, the power of man, the suffering of animals, and the call to mercy. Because we do have a fair bit of dominion just because of what we're doing to the planet. So
Sure. And, there it is. Control the exercise of control sovereignty. I don't think, thank you. I didn't need that, but thank you, Tony. Also, Russell says, why is everything blurry? Do you mean the universe, Russell, or do you mean just the picture? I know you may have to, we have no control over that. We have no dominion over that. Karen, love our time together again. Karen Dawn's Dawn Watch, the Daily Animal World News Watch, is on Facebook and on the internet. There are click-throughs underneath this video. We look forward to our time. You always have some surprises for us, and that's a fun thing. So I look forward to our next visit. Thank you, Karen.
So good to see you.
All right. Karen Dawn, everybody.
Join the flock. Again next time for A Word About Animals on The Mark Thompson Show.
Woohoo!
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, we're kind of the sands in the hourglass are really running out. I wanted to get some Kim fix with some news. Can you give me a little turbo news?
I could give you some turbo news, but I don't know. There's a couple stories that popped up that I think are worthy of discussion.
All right. Let's discuss. Go ahead. Serve them up and we'll discuss.
The first one is...
Did it require an introduction of any kind?
No, I don't think so.
All right. No. Okay.
That's not fake. That's real.
Okay. All right.
First one is I saw this
And wait
story.
1 second. I don't mean to interrupt or delay. But Joan Quigley has given us a $20 super sticker, and we love Joan Quigley. I think,
do love Joan Quigley.
Yeah. Joan, thank you for being part of Spring Ka Ching.
Big shout out.
It's our big fundraiser, and I appreciate you being part of it. And now, Kim, I apologize, but I did want to recognize Joan Quigley for her generosity.
It's a good news, bad news situation over here. So we have this good news story about scientists are now teaming up to publish their climate assessment. This is the one that had been gutted by the Trump administration. And so now there are some private nonprofit organizations that are teaming up to publish this climate-related research to, the story goes, further a congressionally mandated assessment that had been gutted by the Trump administration. This was considered to be very important research that was not going to be published. And so it's good to see that there are nonprofits stepping up to publish it instead.
It's very funny because I saw this. I didn't see that they had come together with this effort to see it published, but I saw the government effort to suppress the information. Because all this assessment of climate damage, where we are in this climate crisis, and I saw the government attempt to, it appeared successful attempt to suppress it, the same way they're suppressing so much other information. They're dry cleaning the website of any mention of Emmett Till, any mention of any kind of a civil rights leader who is critical to the history of and of evolution of civil rights in this country. And so as we face this climate crisis, I thought it was a real problem. And I remember thinking to myself, isn't there a way that these scientists could still get together and get that word out? And now you tell me, Kim, that that indeed is the plan.
The other story I wanted to make note of is this earlier, Inlays had brought this up about the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court being sued by the Trump administration. It's actually by Stephen Miller and his think tank that the Chief Justice shouldn't control the judicial conference. And that is true. I did find this story, and I can't believe that it flew past me in some way. But there is a lawsuit. Stephen Miller's old think tank is asking this federal judge to declare the administrative office of the United States courts and the Judicial Conference of the United States are independent agencies under the executive branch.
Wow.
They want control of this. That is huge. I don't know how it's a story that kind of flew under the radar. Wild. The Trump allies are suing Chief Justice John Roberts. They want the White House to have control of the court system.
Jeez, they name Roberts himself as a defendant.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you, Inlays, for bringing that story, and it's something.
Yeah,
we'll
that was
dig into
very good,
a little more
Inlays. Thank
tomorrow,
you.
But
Yes.
wow. Yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, I had this in news, and this is happening in New York City. They've been asking for a long time for these bodegas, the little stores on every corner that are, I guess, often robbed. They'll get these direct button connections to police departments. They've been asking for this forever. It's called Silent Shield. And now Mayor Eric Adams says he's allocating the money, $1.6 million, for these buttons that these workers in these bodegas can press. And if they feel threatened, if there's violence in the store, and the police will be able to look right in the store, see if anything's going on video cameras, and they'll be able to come right out there.
Wow, that is pretty cool.
Mhm.
It's like the Batman bat beam.
There you go.
I love it.
Mhm.
And there's the announcement in the rain. I have a button like that on this show.
Is it a panic button?
Well, it's when I push it. Here's
I've never seen anything like it.
That's what happens. So I push that button, and then a guy says,
I've
that.
never seen anything like
so
it.
when I want to push that button,
I've never seen anything like
that's all I can get. But I mean, at least I have a button. So,
In addition, tomorrow, big news: Canada's new prime minister is coming to the White House, trying to make a trade deal.
Oh
So
my
that'll be an
gosh.
interesting
Yeah.
meeting. Can't wait. I hope that we get that live.
There will be news. There will be news. There was something else happening live. I was watching it as we were going on the air. I forget what it is now. I kind of lose
I
it.
know. I know
Yeah.
what it is. The
What?
Trump administration is offering $1,000 to migrants if they self-deport.
Yeah,
using
I
the
saw that.
government
The
app.
self-deport, right. Incentive
Yeah.
to self-deport. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
pay $1,000 to get the hell out.
the one thing that I would have hoped, I mean, if they won on this, and that was violent criminals and the removal of all these sort of this, the ugly underbelly of the illegal immigration movement. But it really hasn't been that, They haven't gone for the violent criminals. They've scooped up a bunch of people, told us they're violent criminals, don't know if they are or not, But I see increasingly that they're just grabbing people who aren't violent criminals, Some mom and her son who's got cancer, they get blown out. And again, I don't want to just grab one that, works for my argument. Show me how it's working, but we're not really shown anything. The more they say they're transparent, the more we know the truth, that there is no transparency. So $1,000 self-deportation incentive, I don't know.
They say it'll pay for your plane ticket home.
Yeah. Right. There's that.
Here's $1,000. Bye-bye.
Yeah, try to fly business class on the way home. It's $1,000. Luis says, darn it, Mark, you've doubled down on your incendiary view take with this whole Dominion thing.
It was great. I loved it.
I agree. It was interesting. She blindsided me with the Dominion thing, but I kind of rode with it. All right. Anything else, Kim? That was really good, though. Those are some big stories. Appreciate
Those
that.
are the biggest things we hadn't covered yet. So rock on. Tomorrow we've got a big show.
$1,000 to go to CCOT. Yeah, no. I don't think that's the plan.
No.
Tell me what what's on the show tomorrow, Kim.
Tomorrow, of course, is a David K. Johnston Day, so that's always amazing. And also, we're going to have Megan Haywood Sullivan on the show, and she's a photographer, and she's also a so-called environmental brand strategist. And what that means is she makes these campaigns to make us more sustainable and create an impact. And so it'll be interesting to talk to her as well.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Really, I look forward to that as well. Do you have any thoughts, Tony, on Russell Johnson's question about why everything's blurry?
He's probably, no, I'll tell you exactly what's going on. It's just YouTube. He's basically, his bandwidth was getting lowered. So basically it lowers the picture quality so that it keeps streaming the show live. Just go to your, if you go to the selection and just pick back to resolution back to like 720 or 1080p and you'll be fine. It probably lowered you to 240p is what happened.
That is
so that
Tony. How about that? Yeah, come on. Man knows his stuff. That's why we have him. Yeah. Get us out of any jam. If it's still blurry after that, Russell, you may want to contact a medical professional. You may be having some kind of medical condition that needs attention. Kim, thank you. I very much appreciate your update on news. We will fill out a more robust news segment tomorrow. I pledge it, and it will happen.
Wow.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for quite seriously joining us in this effort of Spring Ka Ching. The fundraising effort continues. We will give you live shows every day here, Monday through Friday. Yeah, Spring Ka Ching. You got to love it. Shadow, take us out with that big, beautiful voice.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Tony, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
We are out of time. The After Party Live with Kim continues until tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you.